So if the movie The Ten Commandments were made today, I think we should start with the shirtless dancing guy as Moses and then watch everybody join in. Because really that is what Moses did when you think about it. In the Old Testament, Moses created a movement. Remember, there were people in Egypt living in slavery, having a pretty rough life. And then God calls Moses, and then Moses goes ahead and seeks to transform the lives of these people. Now keep in mind there are a couple of things. Moses really didn't want the task. Moses really didn't want the job, thought someone else should do it, but God called Moses to do it. And when God calls you to do something, the great thing about that is God does not work in such a way as a leader that God is up here and spoke down this way to Moses. What God did was sharing conversation with Moses. And so here, this text today we have is from Exodus 33, and it's a conversation that Moses is having with God. Moses said to God, "Look, you tell me, lead this people, but you don't let me know whom you're going to send with me. You tell me, I know you well, and you are special to me. If I'm so special to you, then let me in on your plans. That way, I will continue being special to you. Don't forget, this is your people, God. This is your responsibility." God said to Moses, "My presence will go with you. I'll see the journey to the end." I'll see the journey to the end. So Moses had an ability to listen, had a desire to make a difference not only for himself, but the people who were around him, and indeed created a movement that probably in part put us where we are today as the people of God that gathered here today, that believe we are more than our conditions in life. Do you know, throughout history, we've had these kind of movement makers or shirtless dancing guys. People who start the dance like Moses, and then there are those who join in. And you know, they all have one thing in common. That is that they don't know what the future holds, but they do know that the current conditions that they find themselves in are unacceptable. Perhaps those conditions are for them themselves or the people who are around them. But movement makers recognize that God has more in store for all of us. And if we follow God's will, even though we don't know the end of the road, that God's love will come to fruition and goodness will happen. Some of the leaders that are these kind of movement makers are like those who formed that nation we live in today, this nation we live in today. On Tuesday, we'll celebrate our 241st birthday. Can you believe it? Now, actually, that's the day that we adopted the Declaration of Independence. And you know, as I look back at these leaders, some of them are those crazy shirtless dancing guys. They don't quite look that way in that picture there. But there are people that had a willingness to stand up for what they believed in, like Moses. They didn't have a real understanding of what this new nation would be like, but they had a willingness to step forth in faith and to believe that indeed there was a life beyond the British hold and British rule and tyranny. Together they banded in such a way that we continue to live under the same basic governance system that they put together almost 250 years ago. I mean, that is remarkable when you think about it. Throughout history, we have been witness to such movement makers like the ones that started this nation, those people willing to step forth and either start the dance or join the dance in order to transform a conditional way of being. An example is, of course, Mahatma Gandhi, right? Gandhi was around the early 1900s, and he worked very hard to create a place away from British rule for India and for there to be independence from British rule. He employed nonviolent civil disobedience, and he led them to independence and inspired movements for civil rights everywhere, actually throughout the world. Gandhi had a gift for pacifism, unselfishness, and he was pretty progressive for his time. He believed that the caste system that had been created was not fair to everyone, and it was a system that needed to be addressed. And so he went about it, fighting for all people, fighting for those in poverty, ending equality, and indeed pioneering rights for everyone, even women at the time. Not only did we have Gandhi, but in this country we had this guy named Martin Luther King, who was also a movement maker, an American Baptist minister and activist. He became the prime spokesperson for the civil rights movement. He is best known for his roles as that leader, and to be a leader in such a way that he could create non-violent civil disobedience based in Christian beliefs that transformed the people around him and then indeed transformed our government. In fact, he applied the work of Gandhi in his actions and really looked to Gandhi as one who set the stage for the civil rights movement in America. Another leader that we sometimes forget is a guy named Harvey Milk. He was an American politician who became the first openly gay person elected to public office in California. He was actually part of the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, one of the first activists, and it was in the 1970s that he started his activism. He sponsored key civil rights bills that banned discrimination based on sexual orientation. He also went on to fight something called Proposition 6. Proposition 6 was a bill that made it illegal to be gay and to be a teacher. It was a bill that was put forth that said if you were a teacher and if you were gay or lesbian, you could be fired by the school district you worked for. He fought against that, and indeed that did not pass. They believe that Harvey Milk single-handedly has made the most difference in this nation for LGBTQ rights. He continues to be kind of a vision, or actually he was shot by someone in his office and was assassinated, but he continues to kind of serve as a shining example of what it means to have tenacity and belief that all people are created equal. Malala, we all know Malala. Malala is a Pakistani activist, just a young girl, and if you recall, all she wanted to do was to go to school. That's all she wanted. She wanted an education. That's all she wanted. And what happened? The Taliban said no, and eventually she even had an assassination attempt on her own life just because she wanted an education. Malala has gone on to continue activism for women in Pakistan and activism throughout the world. In fact, she is one of the youngest ever Nobel Prize laureates. The youngest ever, in fact. And in fact, she has spoken before the UN, and she continues to devote her life to a movement where all young women in Pakistan have the same rights and responsibilities of everyone else there. She continues to be a global example to all of us of what it looks like if you have a willingness to start a movement and to say, we are a world where all people are created equal, who are loved by God equally, and should have the same rights as one another. Something tells me over the next few days you're going to have a little more time than maybe you've had on a weekly basis with your job and whatnot. I want to encourage you as you gather for these July 4th gatherings and spend some time with your family to ask the people around you who they believe are leaders and movement makers in the world. People with revolutionary ideas. What I find so interesting is for each generation, we each have a different idea of who those people are. And we each have something to learn from the generation before. We have something to learn from Gandhi and from MLK and, of course, the revolutionary leaders of this country. But do you know that there are people out there today that are impacting the younger people in our lives in ways we don't even understand? I want to encourage you to listen up for the people who are out there making a difference for those who are around them. There's a movement right here in Indianapolis about people who are willing to stand with one another in racial equity, where white people are willing to simply stand with our black and Hispanic brothers and sisters in recognition that just because we are white doesn't mean we cannot stand with one another. And you know what? That's sometimes hard to do. There's a whole movement in the community just to simply say, I am here, I am with you, and you are loved. We were reminded this past week that that is so important today. It is so important for people in this country to recognize we still do not all stand on equal ground, and that we still need to find a way to support one another no matter what. This movement is being started, in fact, by people who are younger than me, and I want to encourage you to find some of those folks and to really listen to their stories and how it is that they're standing with their brothers and sisters and recognizing that perhaps they have more rights than their brothers and sisters do. That's happening in the world today, and lots of us don't even recognize it because we're in our own way of being. I found a movement maker this past week that has totally touched my life in a profound way. Her name is Scarlett Lewis. Scarlett Lewis. I don't know, it may have come across your page this week or your email. See, she followed a dance that was started by somebody who I don't even think he knew he was starting a dance. His name was Jesse Lewis. She was her son. He was only 6 years old. See, Jesse got up and went to school on December 14th, 2012, and never came home. Jesse was one of 20 children who were killed at Sandy Hook Elementary School on that day, when someone who was having a difficult time, who I believe was mentally ill, Adam Lanza, a young man, went in, shot 20 children and 6 adults. 26 people went to school that day and never came home. I can't imagine what it was like to be that mother. I can't imagine what it was like to get that word and then to have to come home that evening to a house where my little boy Jesse wasn't there anymore. But Jesse left his mother a message. They had a chalkboard in their kitchen, and when she came home, she looked to the chalkboard and she saw these words. She wasn't quite sure what the word said, and in fact, they're not really even sure where it came from, perhaps a Sesame Street show or something, but they finally discovered that they believed that the words on that chalkboard were saying this: nurturing, healing, and love. Jesse left that message for his mother on that day: nurturing, healing, and love. I don't know if he had some premonition. No one knows. But we do know that this message was left. And she could have erased the board saying, I'm not really sure what it says, but instead, she paid attention. She has gone around since and tried to spread a message of nurturing, healing, and love in the world. She started first on the East Coast. That's simply her message. That's simply it. And she says through sharing this message with different people and the story of her son and the story of her family, she has found just that: nurturing, healing, and love. The most profound gift that she says that she has found is the gift of forgiveness. The gift of forgiving, and it's forgiving that which she does not understand. And the only way that she has been able to do that is by nurturing herself and others, loving herself and others, and sharing in the transforming of the world with healing, hope, and love. It's a pretty powerful message when you think about it. Someone who could be completely devastated and just stuck where she was could not do it. She had to keep going on, and she had to make a difference. Friends, I think in some way or another, we are each called to be the crazy, shirtless, dancing guy, or the first one to follow the shirtless, dancing, crazy guy. Because that's how movements start. We all can be part of a movement. What we have to do is to be mindful on a daily basis what is important to us. For us as Christians and as a community of faith, we at the Garden believe that it is important that all God's children know the power of God's love, and we're all in this together. There's no one that stands above or there's no one that stands below. We all stand in the circle together. What we need to do is seek out movements that continue to remind us that together we are more, and that together we can transform the world with the power of God's love. I don't know about you, but I think that's really why we're all here. I think it started with Moses, who believed that the current conditions for him and the people who were around him were not good enough. And he set off with a love for God and indeed transformed the lives of many people. I believe it was there for George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin and Betsy Ross and all of those who were there for the start of this nation. I believe Gandhi had a willingness to say, wait a minute, this is not all right. Let's come together and create a dance where we all can find a place in this community. MLK, and yes, even Scarlett Lewis and Jessie are all movement makers. Friends, I'm ready. I don't know about you. I am ready to join the dance that will ensure that the love of God is the song that everyone hears, and that together we can indeed transform the world. Let's start it right here, living in America. Amen.